Okay, so in this video I'm going to show you about the stub zones. So we've done primary and secondary already, and in this one we're going to do a stub zone. So my intention is to put a stub zone record onto DC2, which will then act as a kind of pointer to one of the primary zones on DC1. So thereby meaning that there's nothing actually copied to the second domain name server as such, but it simply points there, and then all changes are then made on the primary zone of the first DNS server. So if I go onto here, I've got my noad.pri forward lookup zone. I'm just choosing this one. Could be anyone if you wanted. So if I do new host there, so if I call this stub test, so that fully qualified domain name there will be stubtest.noad.pri, and for this one I'm just going to put in an example address of say 76, for example. There isn't actually a host sitting on this IP, but it will still show you, for the purposes of this demonstration, what happens. So now I'm going to head over to DC2 here, and then we're going to create a stub zone there in a second. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause the video momentarily while we head over to my Windows 8.1 machine, just to show you what it is like before we actually add the stub zone. Okay, so now I'm over on my Windows 8.1 machine and in PowerShell, so I can show you the IP configuration. And you can see it's got the address 10.0.0.181, and this is actually on the corp.lan domain as well. So the important thing to note here is that whilst it's got the DHCP server address of 10.0.0.10, it has actually only got one DNS server now, 10.0.0.20. This is the second one that I've got. So DC2 has got the DNS server on, so it only knows about this one now. That's important to remember when I do this. So I'm going to now do ping stub test, which is the one, the A record that we created earlier, noad.pri, and return. Now you can probably guess from the length of time that that's taking that it's not going to pick anything up. Usually it would come back in a few seconds. So the ping request there could not find the host, stubtest.noad.pri. Check the name and try again. Well, we know that the name is correct because it's the one that we've just set. The important thing to note is that it can't see that name in that zone because there's no corresponding record on the DNS server that it's got set there. So if I pause the video now and we head back over to the DNS server. Okay, so now we're going to go about doing the actual stub zone on the DNS server again, DC2. Now we've got our zone here, noad.pri, and you can see that the stub test there, a record of 10.0.0.76 is present there. Now what's important is to right click properties here, and then we're going to check that the zone transfers is allowed, and that only to servers listed on the name servers tab. That's fine. So we need to just check that DC2 here is is one of those permitted name servers. So you can see there it's got 10.00.20. So if I click OK, now we need to come down here onto the second DNS server and we do new zone, click next. Okay, I'm going to do a stub zone. This can be stored in AD as well, replicated, and here if we come down here, so no ad.pri. Now we put in the master server here 10.00.10, and it should then resolve. That's fine, it's validated, and finish. Now when we click here, it's going to say zone not loaded by DNS server. So if I right click here, transfer from master, and you can now see that that's transferred over. Now the important thing to note is that it's not like a secondary zone where it's going to actually come up with the records here, because the stub zone is simply being looked at on this server and then going straight up to here to the original primary zone up here on the first DNS server. So that's why it differs from a secondary zone where you actually see the records populated. The point of this is simply for it to hit there and then realize that it needs to go back up to here to find the actual records. So let's head over now to the Windows 8.1 machine again and see what happens. Okay, so we're back on the Windows 8.1 machine. I've just done ipconfig just so that you can be reminded of that again. We've got the IPv4 address of 10.0.0.181 and the DNS server is 10.0.0.20. So let's see what happens now if we ping that other record. So ping stub test.no ad.pri. Now we can see we've been successful here. Straight away, instead of saying there's no record of that, it's come back straight away with the IP address that we set in there earlier, 10.0.0.76, my test machine. Obviously in this demonstration I've not actually got a machine at this IP address, but I just wanted you to see that it will actually resolve. It will find that stubtest.no ad.pri. That's because it's now got a stub record on the second DNS server 10.0.0.20, which then points off to the first DNS server DC1, and it returns this actual address. So you can see there, if there was a machine at this address 10.0.0.76, it would then come back with the packets saying successful. So that concludes that demonstration.